Final Fantasy II, not to be confused with Final Fantasy II, released in North America, which was actually Final Fantasy IV. Confusing, I know. Hated by many fans, Final Fantasy II is the black sheep of the franchise, but why? Is it actually as bad as everyone says it is? It was a game that dared to break the traditional RPG conventions with its unique leveling system, character development, and narrative structure. Over the years, Final Fantasy II has garnered both praise and criticism. Some applaud it for its innovative ideas, while others debate its execution. We'll be delving into these aspects, examining the gameplay mechanics, character development, and overall experience, all while going for that juicy platinum trophy. While I have played other Final Fantasy games, I've never played FF2 before, so today I'll be addressing the burning question on everyone's mind: Final Fantasy II, was it any good? Here it is, the follow-up to the one that started it all. Originally released all the way back in December of 1988, literally 362 days after the original Final Fantasy hit the shelves. Now that is dedication. They had lightning in a bottle with the first game, but did they have the magic to do it again? Considering they go on to make another one of these, I'd say the answer is yes. Today, we'll be exploring its strengths, weaknesses, and everything in between to determine whether this classic RPG stands the test of time. Final Fantasy II was originally released only in Japan due to a multitude of reasons, such as limited resources and prioritizing other projects at the time. When Final Fantasy II was localized and released in North America for the NES in 1991, it was actually a different game. The NA version was a rebranded version of Final Fantasy IV, the fourth game in the series. This was done to avoid confusion, as the original Final Fantasy II and III were not initially released outside of Japan. Years later, Final Fantasy II, the original Final Fantasy II, received an official English release in both EU and NA as part of the Final Fantasy Origins collection for PlayStation 1 in 2003. This release was a faithful port of the original game, maintaining the unique leveling system and other features. It has since been released on various consoles such as PSP, Game Boy Advance, cell phones, and now the Pixel Remaster, which is what I'll be playing. Just like the first Pixel Remaster, this one ignores any additional content added in any remake since the original, setting out to be as faithful as it can, which I really do appreciate. But that said, Final Fantasy II is often criticized by fans for its unusual leveling and progression system, as well as its difficulty. Some even claim it's worse than Final Fantasy XIII. Just kidding, I actually really love Final Fantasy XIII. That's why I named one of my party members Lightning. Sometimes Final Fantasy II feels like it's a huge waste of time. That's not to say it isn't good, and I'm not saying it isn't worth playing. All I'm saying is that it is going to waste your time. I set out to play the Pixel Remasters without any guides or previous knowledge of them going in, and I really should have expected this, but Final Fantasy II has a lot of missable content, which matters if you're like me and want to get the achievements or trophies. There are chests and monsters that can only be accessed at certain parts of the game, and progressing forward means that they're gone for good in that save. But it isn't just that. There are concepts in this game that just reek of trying to prolong the gameplay in cheap ways. In the first game, each dungeon was fun to explore and had tons of hidden treasures. In this game, dungeons are a painful maze littered with doors and rooms with nothing in them. There are literally hundreds of these doors throughout the entire game. I've since learned that in the original, they upped the encounter rate inside these rooms, but I'm not sure that carried on to the remaster here. They felt useless and annoying, and I really came to resent them, but I couldn't ignore them because rarely there was a chest inside. There are more things that waste your time, but we'll get there. It was interesting seeing the different choices they made from the original. The potions heal for more than 20 now, key items and important words are highlighted in color, blindness persists after battle, and venom exists now. They also lowered the amount of monsters on the screen from 9 to 8, just to name a few changes. One of the main differences is you no longer play as class characters, you finally play as named characters, and they can be whatever you want them to be, although they do have a bias somewhat guiding you to turn them into the obvious choice. Unlike the first game in the series, which used a traditional experience point based leveling system, Final Fantasy II used a system which your character's stats improved based on how often you use certain abilities. Kinda similar to how weapon skills work in Classic WoW if you've ever played that. See, your characters don't have a level, instead their stats grow depending on what they do in battles. If you use magic, the magic stats grow, and a battle with low HP, your health grows. You do, however, have weapon and spell levels. It's fun watching spells level up as the animation changes, but they level so slowly, wasting your time. You can max a spell if you just focus on one character and get the rest to defend, but trying to get all your character spells to the max level of 16 is just a massive waste of time. There's that phrase again, and it's not really worth it in the end. Weapons, on the other hand, aren't fun to level up. Nothing changes but your power, and it punishes you for wanting to change weapons big time. This made it difficult to level up certain skills' stats if you didn't use those abilities frequently enough. From my understanding, most of the hate from this game comes from those who played the original NES version, because it was filled with empty rooms with no treasure, and it has an extremely high encounter rate. It felt like you get a random battle every 5 steps. These didn't change with the Pixel remaster, but they did change some things to make it easier. In the NES version, you had stats that actually decreased if you leveled up a corresponding stat. For example, if you started leveling up spells, magic, or MP, you'd actually be penalized and start losing strength and health. Thankfully, later versions fixed this. A fun little new gameplay mechanic is the keyword system, where you learn terms and can ask about them. I really liked it. It helps progress the story in an interesting way. It would have been great if there was more dialogue though, rather than most characters just responding with a question mark if it didn't matter to them at the time. In the original NES version, the game had a high level of difficulty, with some battles being nearly impossible to win without a lot of grinding and preparation. However, in the Pixel remaster, you can turn on boosts like 4 times gil and 4 times skill leveling, as well as turn off encounters. You can even turn off gil or skill farming if you want to go for a challenge run or something. I'd argue that turning off the encounters boost was the most useful because of the insanely high encounter rate in this game. It's very noticeable coming from Final Fantasy I. They also added the auto battle feature, which allows you to repeat the same actions in battle multiple times without having to manually select them each time. This makes the grinding and leveling up less tedious and time consuming. Additionally, the remaster adds permanent mini-maps that show the locations of treasure chests and entrances to dungeons. I could not imagine playing this game without a map. The Pixel remaster also allows you to forget spells, defend in battle, run on the world map, and most importantly, you can autosave and quick save, which is extremely convenient. The difficulty in Pixel Remaster has been rebalanced compared to the original NES version. The developers have made several changes to the game to make it more balanced and enjoyable for modern players, while still retaining the original spirit of the game. Purists will likely be disappointed with the changes to make the game more accessible, but having a version that encourages new players to give the older games a try is not a bad thing. Another factor that contributed to the game's negative reception was its localization. The original Japanese version of the game had a much more complex story and characters with greater depth, but these elements were simplified or removed entirely in the English version. Despite these criticisms, Final Fantasy II has still managed to gain a following over the years, with some fans appreciating its unique leveling system and challenging gameplay. However, it remains one of the more divisive entries in the series. Overall, the gameplay of Final Fantasy II offers a satisfying mix of exploration, combat, and character progression, along with a unique leveling system that sets it apart from the other games in the series. As for the story, I'll just give you a brief SparkNote summary before going into detail. From the get-go, it's pretty apparent this game is taking inspiration from Star Wars. They've done this with many other Final Fantasy games, like with Biggs and Wedge and Final Fantasy VII and onwards. You're a ragtag resistance up against the big bad Empire. You play as Firion, Maria, Guy, and Leon, who is immediately lost, and then your 4th character slot keeps swapping between other characters along the way, which is incredibly annoying because they're constantly underpowered compared to your main 3, and you end up wasting time, there's that phrase again, or you end up wasting training or gearing just to have them leave unexpectedly. It certainly does make for a more compelling story though. I really enjoyed getting to know the extended cast of Gordon, Yosef, Layla, Minwu, and Ricard. It's a bit of a convoluted story. The Emperor and his empire are attacking the world and has brought forth monsters from the underworld. Your team starts out by proving themselves and joining the rebellion. You seek out mithril equipment for the resistance and free some people along the way. You then destroy the Dreadnought, a massive airship meant to wreak havoc upon the world, but the king succumbs to his injuries. Fulfilling the king's last wishes, you go and seek the aid of the Dragoons, and you enlist pirates along the way, but you find out that all the Dragoons are gone. You return to finish the assault on the kingdom of Fynn, and set out to receive the ultimate spell, Ultima. You return to Fynn and enter a magical cyclone and destroy the Emperor, but he rises from hell and this time he's much more powerful. He raises the castle Pandemonium, so you have to travel down into it and end him for real. The Emperor was a bit of a letdown. I was excited when he came back because I wasn't really invested into the Dark Knight being the big bad. I was also excited when they told me I would have to travel to hell to get him. I imagined another entire hellish game world, but instead you just get to the dungeon Pandemonium, which is brought into the world, which is fair. It's beautiful and fun, but I really feel like they missed a great opportunity to create another overworld map of hell, have you travel into hell, which they do in Final Fantasy IV, so that's always good to see. I destroyed the Emperor on my first try. He didn't even get close to wiping me, my spells weren't maxed, and I didn't grind like crazy. He was easy and it was really a letdown. Overall, the story of Final Fantasy II explores themes of resistance, redemption, and the enduring power of the human spirit. It showcases the protagonist's journey from ordinary individuals to heroic figures as they strive to protect their world from the darkness and tyranny of the Emperor. Now onto the trophies. There are 28 total trophies including the Platinum. It is estimated to take about 20 hours and is a 2 of 10 difficulty. Many of them are story related, so I'll be going into a little more depth with the stories along with these trophies. The first trophy we obtain is Password Wild Rose. The rebellion commenced against the Palmycian Empire. This is for completing the intro. The game starts with our 4 main characters, Firion, Maria, Guy, and Leon, which is Maria's brother, being attacked by the evil Empire. The Emperor of Palmycia released monsters from the underworld to end the peace that had been present in the world for a very long time, and he seeks to conquer the whole world. In the Kingdom of Fynn, a rebel army had come together to tackle this threat, but the Emperor's forces took control of their castle. Our 4 protagonists are defeated by the Emperor's forces, but luckily they're saved by Hilda and Minwu. Leon gets separated from the party at this point, and their life forces are renewed. They realize that Hilda is the princess of Fynn, and they want to join the rebel army to fight against the Emperors and retake the castle. She informs us of a magical metal known as Mithril, which will help the rebellion. She originally gave the assignment of finding Mithril to Yosef and Salamon, but has not heard back from him in some time. So she tasked us with finding him, and the trophy pops. The next trophies we get are Apprentice, Experienced, and Legendary Warrior for defeating 100, 300, and 500 monsters respectively. Very simple. Next, we get another story trophy. The Empire destroys numerous towns with the Dreadnought. Hilda assigns Minwu to join us. He gives us a canoe, and we learn from Hilda that the Empire is building a Dreadnought airship using the people of Bafsk to assist. We get a ship to cross the sea to the town of Poft. Here is where we meet the legendary Cid. Hilda mentioned that he was great at building airships, and he has an airship that we can use for a fee. We use this airship in order to cross to Salaman to reach Yosef. The men of Salaman have been enslaved by the Empire to work there, so we find Yosef and he asks us to rescue the men from Summit Falls before he will help us. We go to the mines, free the slaves, and find Yosef's daughter Nellie. Our friendly neighborhood thief Paul is able to help rescue everyone, and we're able to recover some Mithril. Princess Hilda then asks us to travel to Bafsk to talk to a man who has found a way to reach the Empire's ship Dreadnought. We head there, and General Borgin is making the town, and soldiers work hard to finish the Dreadnought. We eventually find the man Hilda told us about, who shows us a secret back entrance to the Dreadnought through the sewers. We then run into the Dark Knight and General Borgin, who tells us it's too late as we witness the Dreadnought take off and attack numerous towns. After that, we get a few more easy trophies: Thrifty Spender, Smart Saver, and Money Bags. Obtain 10,000, 50,000, and 100,000 gil respectively. This comes naturally playing the game, and you can also turn on boosts to gain 4 times more gil. Next, we get a trophy for blowing up the Dreadnought airship. After seeing the Dreadnought attack numerous towns, we go back to Cid and find out the Dreadnought's weakness, which is the engine. Destroy it, and the Dreadnought will come crashing down. Speaking to the king once more, we're told that we need to find the goddess's seal, which is located in the snow cavern. Yosef joins the party, and we head to the snow cavern to find out there's a secret passage to the goddess's seal, but sadly get ambushed by General Borgin. After defeating the general, he summons a boulder to roll towards and crush us, but Yosef holds it up long enough to let the rest of the party survive, and Yosef, with this act, sacrifices himself. We head north and find the Dreadnought docked and sneak in to destroy it. We find the engine room, throw the sunfire in the engine, which sets it on fire, and we make our escape. We flee in Sid's airship as the Dreadnought is destroyed and the trophy pops. Here we get some more easy trophies, Field Research Basic and Advanced, for completing 10% and 50% of the Bestiary respectively. There's also one for 100%, but we'll get that later. A Bestiary is a compendium of beasts. For this, you have to find and defeat every single enemy present in the entire game. There are 128 of these to find and defeat, with some being missable. I really hate missable trophies, so I followed a guide to make sure I didn't miss any. Next, we get a Pirate's Mate. For obtaining a ship from the pirate Layla, Gordon explains to the party about the Dragoons and the Wyverns, and we set off to Deist via ship, which this friendly pirate Layla offers us a ride in. While going on the ship to Deist, Layla and her pirates decide to surround the party and declare that they will let them live, but they'll be taking all their belongings. Once we thwart the attack, they decide to show some leniency, and Layla decides that she and her pirate shipmates would like to help us and fight against the Empire. She joins the party and the trophy pops. After that, we get Rookie and Veteran Treasure Hunter. Collect treasure from 10 and 50% of all treasures in the game. They're hidden everywhere, and there's also a trophy for 100%, but we'll also get that later. Next, we get Rebel Victory for defeating Commander Gatos and reclaiming Castle Finn. With Layla now part of the party, the destination remains the same, Deist. Once we reach Castle Deist, we find a child and his mother who informs us that they're the only two left in the castle and all the Dragoons were killed. However, there is one remaining Wyvern, but no one can understand it. She tells us that a pendant located in the Cavern of the Wyverns would allow us to understand and communicate with the beast. We head there and find the remains of a Dragoon and also a pendant. We quickly head back to the castle and use it to communicate with the Wyvern, but it tells us that it will not survive for much longer. The Wyvern states that a Dragoon named Ricard had just left before the Empire attacked in order to find the ultimate magic. The Wyvern asks us to take the last Wyvern egg to the cavern where they found the pendant in order to save it. Sadly, not after this request, the Wyvern passes away. We go back to the cave, put the egg in the life spring, and leave. Back near Finn, Gordon and Hilda tell us of their plans to retake the castle. We battle through Finn and make it to the castle's throne room where we meet Commander Gatos. After defeating him, the rebels are able to reclaim the castle and the trophy pops. The last Dragoon. Become allies with Ricard the Dragoon. After recapturing Castle Finn, Gordon asks us to go to Mysidia to find Minwu, as no one has heard back from him since he left to search for the Ultima tomb. We set sail for the tower, but when we're almost there, a whirlpool appears and sucks the ship down. The party wonders where they are and also where Layla is. It turns out we're inside Leviathan, the giant sea serpent. We venture forth and find other people inside, including Ricard the Dragon. After talking with them, we realize we can team up and he joins the party. Magic Tactics. Along the way, I got this trophy for leveling up one of my magic spells to level 16. You level up magic spells by simply using them. I just used Cure with my White Mage whenever I needed to heal, and I got this naturally. Birth of a Wyvern. We get this for hatching the last Wyvern egg. After Ricard joins the party, we exit Leviathan and escape via ship. We head to the Mysidian Tower, break the seal, and get inside. Once we reach the top floor, we encounter Minwu, who tells us that a magic binding the seal there is incredibly strong, and he has to use all of his magic in a focused charge in order to try and break it. He is able to do that, but sadly it takes too much out of him and he perishes. With all these deaths, I'm starting to think The Last of Us 2 took inspiration from this game. We go through the unsealed door and obtain the Ultima tomb. We then head back to Castle Finn to speak with Princess Hilda. But we learn the Emperor has summoned a cyclone which is going to attack Finn at any time, and it's already destroyed the towns of Altair, Getrea, Paloom, and Poft. So we make our way to the 3rd floor of the castle and use the pendant we got earlier on the mirror, and an image of the wyvern egg we left in the springs appears and it shows a young wyvern. The last egg is hatched and the wyvern arrives in Finn, and the trophy pops. New Palamecia. The Dark Knight ascended the Emperor's throne. We use the wyvern to fly straight into the cyclone. As we approach, the Emperor attacks us. Once we are victorious and vanquish the Emperor, we head straight back to the Castle Finn to tell Princess Hilda and Gordon of our success. Celebrations ensue until news is brought that Leon, the Dark Knight, has declared him as the new Emperor, and the trophy pops. Allied Offensive. Past allies join the rebel army. After hearing the shocking news that Leon, Maria's brother, is now the Emperor, they wonder if Leon is under a spell, and Gordon questions if they can take on the task given the fact that Leon is Maria's brother. The party talks to Sid, who had survived the attack in Paloom, and he offers to lend him his airship in order to deal with this threat. Sadly, as he rests in bed, he passes away. We eventually reach the throne inside of Castle Palamecia and encounter Leon. He talks about having great power, and then suddenly from behind him, the Emperor appears. The Emperor doesn't want the Empire back, and talks about all the new powers he's gained in Hell and how he'll rule the world. Picard challenges the Emperor and summons the Wyvern to lift Firion, Maria, Guy, and Leon out of harm's way in his last act. We arrive back at Castle Finn, and Princess Hilda demands to know what happened. Firion explains to her, and Maria reaches out to her brother Leon and accepts the offer to join the party in order to defeat the Emperor once and for all. Leon joins the party, and the trophy pops. Memory Lane. After all that, we get the trophy for learning all the passwords. You need to learn them and then ask key characters about them in order to find out more information and progress the plot forward. There are 15 passwords, and once all 15 passwords are learned, the trophy will unlock after learning the last password, Jade Passage. Weapon Tactics. I got this for leveling up one weapon skill to level 16. Kinda similar to the magic, the leveling in this game is sorta weird. You have to attack with your weapon of choice to level up its skill. I use swords and farm this out by attacking myself with a blood sword. The blood sword is unique in that it heals me for 100% of the damage I cause, so every time I hit myself, I also heal myself for the same amount, therefore I can't die. This allowed me to get some of the most powerful weapons in the game, such as Excalibur. Speaking of which, our next trophy is for obtaining that. Sword of Myth. Obtain Excalibur. The legendary sword returns from Final Fantasy I. Once Leon has rejoined the party after the Emperor has risen from Hell, you can go back to Castle Deist, ask the mother about Dragoons, which is one of the passwords you would have learned earlier either in Castle Deist or Altair, and they'll thank you and give you the most treasured possession of the Dragoons of Deist, Excalibur. Adventurous Wayfarer. Travel to all the map locations. There's 27 locations that are required to be visited, with 25 of them being locations you have to visit for the story. 2 are missable. I hate trophies like that, but luckily I traveled to both locations earlier, being Chocobo Forest and the Rebel Camp. This unlocks once we reach the final dungeon in the game, Pandemonium. It is also here where we get the legendary Treasure Hunter trophy for collecting 100% of all the chests. It pops when we open this chest. War's End. Defeated the Emperor and restored peace to the world. We get this for defeating the last boss and finishing the game. The party heads back to Castle Finn, where Princess Hilda and Gordon thank them for all their efforts. Peace is restored, Leon leaves the party, and Firion, Maria, and Guy see images of all their dead friends saying their final goodbyes as they leave the castle. Last and certainly least is Field Research Professional for completing 100% of the Bestiary entries. This one took the longest by far because there are some rare enemies and some that you can miss, but luckily I just followed that guide and the trophy pops. And we also get the Platinum Trophy. Although not the best game, Final Fantasy II left behind a legacy for many of the games that followed. It was the first for a lot of things in the Final Fantasy franchise, like chocobos, coeurls, and the disgusting Malboros. Chocobos became an iconic element of the Final Fantasy series, and they have appeared in various forms in many of the games after. They are used as a means of transportation, and you can avoid random battles while using them. And speaking of avoiding battles, Final Fantasy II added the Coeurl and Malboro enemies, two very dangerous recurring enemies found in many other games. I hated fighting these things. The Malboro is a large green creature with tentacles and a gaping mouth filled with sharp teeth, known for their signature bad breath attack. It inflicts a variety of status effects to your party like Silence, Mini, Toad, and Poison. I remember in Final Fantasy X, you needed to have First Strike when facing these enemies, or else your party was dead. Coeurls, on the other hand, are just as bad, if not worse, in this game. They can use a move called Blaster, which can paralyze your entire party, rendering you useless. Leviathan, a giant sea serpent, is another powerful being, making its first appearance in this game before becoming a summon in later series. This was also the first game where they added Masamune, one of the many recurring weapons in the Final Fantasy games. In this game, it is a super powerful sword that can deal out tons of damage. I found this randomly in a hidden room when exploring the final dungeon in the game. It also makes an appearance in many other games like Final Fantasy VII with Sephiroth, which in my opinion is the coolest iteration of it. This was also the first time Ultima was mentioned in Final Fantasy, which became a staple spell in the franchise, known for being extremely powerful. Ricard Highwind was a Dragoon, and both his last name and his job have become recurring elements in the franchise, like the Dragoon job in later games, and Arani Highwind, a Dragoon in Final Fantasy XV, or the name of the airship in Final Fantasy VII, which was also called the Highwind. And speaking of airships, they're back, and again, it's a fun way to explore the world, and this time it was a gift from the one and only Cid. This was the first official time Cid was included in Final Fantasy, and they even added a Cid in the re-released versions of the original Final Fantasy, which I learned after my last video about that game. As for the music in this game, the Pixel Remaster has a music player in the main menu, just like in FF1's remaster, and Nobuo Uematsu is added again. The music in this game is just phenomenal, like Dungeon Theme, Pandemonium, main theme, Rebel Army, Battle Theme B. This might be my favorite battle theme. In conclusion, they didn't capture lightning in a bottle again with this one. This one was a misstep from greatness. The fantasy is missing as it's far too grounded in topics of war right up until the end, and a lot of the game wastes a lot of your time and frustrates you. But I do not think Final Fantasy II is that bad, or at least not with the Pixel remaster. I do understand some of the criticism this game faced with the original NES version, such as the leveling system, dungeon layout, empty rooms with an encounter rate so high that you could not go more than 5 steps without battling. The remaster fixed a lot of those things and is an overall enjoyable experience for the modern audience, which I think that's what Square was going for. That said, I still had a great time with this game. It's worth playing if you enjoy old school 2D RPGs. The story is interesting enough, it's just not their best. The storytelling was a clear step up, but the themes of the story for me at least were a bit of a step back. But I definitely recommend to players who like RPGs and want to experience an authentic Final Fantasy II experience. It's always great seeing old games be preserved onto modern consoles. Overall, I'd rate the difficulty a 2, the fun a 7, and the grind about a 4. It took me about 18 hours to get the Platinum Trophy, but it was definitely worth it. And for now, on to Final Fantasy III.